It's day 22 of the Karen Read trial. This is part 2 of my daily recap. Trooper Michael Proctor is on the stand. He is being questioned by Adam Lally, the Commonwealth, and it gets so good. If you haven't watched part 1, go back and do that to catch up. After going to Dayton, he goes to 1 Meadows Ave. He does not go to 34 Fairview at all. He says he wanted to document John O'Keefe's vehicle and the Ring camera that he had. He also wrote a search warrant for Ring to get the camera footage from 1 Meadows Ave. We watched the video of Karen Read backing her car out of John O'Keefe's garage again, and then we see a bunch of pictures of John O'Keefe's car and his garage, and nothing looks damaged. After that, Trooper Proctor heads to 34 Fairview, and by this point in the investigation, it's been a few days, the weather had changed, snow is melting, and he wants to see if he can find more evidence. More evidence is admitted. It's a lot of broken taillight pieces that are found on the lawn of 34 Fairview. He says that he wasn't able to get an activity log from Ring and that there was no video of Karen Read pulling into the garage the night of January 29th, and there was no video of Karen Read, Jen McCabe, and Carrie Roberts looking at the back of Karen Read's vehicle with the broken taillight when Carrie and Jen had said that she said that. Trooper Proctor says that he knows Chris and Julie Albert. He grew up in Canton. He went to Canton High School. Courtney, his sister, and Julie's sister, Jillian, are best friends. He says that his sister is one of his best friends. They talk 5 to 6 times a day. They both have kids around the same age, and they're mostly talking about their daily lives and things with their kids. We learned that the interview with Chris and Julie Albert happened in early to mid-February. Sergeant Buchanan was also there, and it happened at the Albert home. He says although he knew them, he had never been to their home. They had never been to his home either. And this is where we get into the craziness. So Trooper Proctor is presented with a text thread from a few of his friends from high school. And he said going back even to first grade, one lives in Tennessee, one is a Boston police officer, and his nickname with the group is Chip. I'm pulling my notes out for this because it just is so crazy. So I also should mention that we don't see the text, so I couldn't take screenshots of it. It's him literally reading the text. They start talking about John O'Keefe dying, and one of the friends says, oh, the owner of that house is really going to get it. And he says, no, he's also a BPD cop. One of the friends was confused in the text chain and says the owner of the house was a woman cop that beat him, ? And Michael Proctor goes to explain there was evidence at this point that Mr. Albert had nothing to do with John O'Keefe's death and that he had potentially been hit in the face with a glass, and we assumed that it was a domestic. One of the friends asked, is she hot at least? And he says, she's a whack job, and he spells out C-U-N-T, and there's an objection, and the judge asks him to read out, are these all of your words? You need to read them all out. So he says exactly what he says. Yeah, she's a babe, Fall River accent though, no ass. So here's a tweet I found on Twitter with it. This is what he wrote. From all accounts, the homeowner, Brian Albert, didn't do anything wrong, and talks about Karen Read. He goes on to explain that he shouldn't have said any of this in this type of setting. He never goes into specifics of an investigation in text with his friends or anything. We learn later that he really has gone into specifics, though. In the group text, a picture is sent of Karen Read walking out in handcuffs, and a friend writes, is that chick a smoke? And he responds, eh. He also says she has a leaky hole, leaks poo. He's referring to her medical issues. I'm not sure if it's Crohn's or IBS or something, but how insensitive. Why are you texting this? He says that these are juvenile comments made between him and his friends, and it didn't compromise the evidence or the investigation. We continue on with the text messages, and now we're hearing some between Courtney and Michael Proctor. Courtney is the sister, for the record. He tells his sister that the incident on January 29th is a homicide, and the victim was at the bar drinking with Chris and Julie, and he's going over to interview them right now. A few days later, we learn that Julie is with Courtney Proctor, and Julie said to Courtney, when this is all over, she wants to get you a gift, meaning get Michael Proctor a gift, and he says, get it for Elizabeth, his wife, instead. He then explains that he never received a gift and neither did Elizabeth. But does this sound like a bribe? I just have to remind everybody that it's not normal for an investigator to read their personal text messages to a jury in an open courtroom. We then get into text messages between Michael Proctor and his wife Elizabeth. He says, we're going to lock this whack job up. And this is on June 9th, 2022, after her grand jury indictment. Now we're getting into text messages between him and his work buddies. Officer DeCecco, I believe, is an officer that handles the evidence for the Mass State Police. So this is interesting. He said, we're buddies. We hang out together outside of work. DeCecco texts on April 28th. It's a rookie move not going to the ME, medical examiner, to get the homicide determination. And Proctor says he had 2 conference calls with her. DeCecco said, it's not good enough. You should have had me do it. They're making jokes that they didn't get the ruling in the autopsy for John O'Keefe that they wanted because his death was ruled undetermined, not a homicide. The next text chain is from DeCecco, Trooper Proctor, and Kokoski, I think the trooper is. And it starts on June 9th, and it's a picture of a toy Santa Claus. And then Trooper Proctor says, do you like women who shit themselves? He said he made a regrettable comment about Miss Reed's medical condition. And then there's a text message from Trooper Proctor that says, she said that Alberts beat the shit out of O'Keefe and left her for dead, and that's why her tail light is broke. And then DeCecco writes, bitch, F-word her. June 9th was the day that she was being processed in Milton. So this was what this was all in relation to. The next comment is something that was total bombshell during the opening statements by David Yannetti. So we see a text from Trooper Proctor. This is with Buchanan and some other higher-ups, other co-workers. I think it's a group of 5 people. He says, I'm going through R-word client's phone, no nudes. He confirms he was talking about Miss Reed's phone. He had a search warrant at this point, and they couldn't get into Karen Reed's phone. Supposedly, they didn't have the passcode to it, so this is when they finally get into it in August. He says it was a distasteful joke, but he was looking for location data, text messages, Google searches, and he ended up coming across text messages between Miss Reed and her attorney, and then he had to stop and turn the phone back in. After the text messages were removed with the attorney, he got the phone back in the spring of 2023 to further investigate. Now we're into the cross-examination. It's going to be done by Alan Jackson. I have less than 3 minutes to share how this all goes. Alan Jackson comes out with anger. He doesn't even come out as acting. It is pure anger for his client. He says that in the summer of 2022, on August 17th, you were sitting at your desk around 10 p.m. at night, and you were going through Karen Reed's personal cell phone. You were texting with your friends and your colleagues and your supervisors, Trooper Buchanan and Trooper Fanning. You were bragging about going through her cell phone. He says, how did you refer to Karen Reed on your text message exchanges? And he says he used regrettable language. Trooper Proctor is then shown a picture of David Yannetti. It's entered into evidence with this text exchange, and this is the 5 people that are on the text exchange. It's DeCecco, Fanning, Buchanan, and some other officers. It started off by DeCecco sending a picture of David Yannetti, and Trooper Proctor says, I'm going through his R-word client's phone right now. Alan Jackson is hammering it in. As an unbiased professional, the subject of your investigation, you referred to your bosses, this woman, as the R word. I'm not going to ever say it, but this is completely offensive. He asked, were you ever reprimanded for this? Were you ever suspended? Nothing. No, there was no action done. There was actually a like on the text by Buchanan. Trooper Proctor then says, I hate that man. I truly hate that man. And he was speaking about this man, David Yannetti. Alan Jackson wants to know, were you upset that Karen Reed got representation? And he said, no, that's her right. It's fine. And Alan Jackson wants to know, how do you feel about this man now? And he goes, I still don't care for him now. It was a crazy moment because we had this wide camera angle on the screen, and Karen Reed's eyes when he said that he still didn't care for him now were out of control. So Alan Jackson is really hammering in again. So you sent to your bosses no nudes so far. Were you looking for naked photographs of Miss Reed? He doubles down on, no, I was looking for text messages, Google searches, etc. Alan Jackson asks, have you ever looked for naked pictures of a male you've been investigating? He wants to know, do you believe your text messages were reflective of an objective investigator? Michael Proctor said he believes that poor jokes have no bearing on the facts and the integrity of the investigation. Alan Jackson asks, you can't be biased against the person you're investigating. And Michael Proctor says, correct. Everybody's a suspect until they're not, is what Alan Jackson ends with. And Bev ends a little bit early for the day. There's no trial tomorrow, so I will see you guys on Wednesday.